Right, the UFC has fallen asleep at the wheel. They've gotten lazy. And at this point, they're just phoning it in. Don't get me wrong, we still have interesting fighters and great matchups. I mean, there's some brilliant fights already lined up for this year, and more bangers on the way. I don't know if it's that Dana lost interest when he stopped being an owner in the company and just became the CEO. I don't know if it's just he's preoccupied with his new shiny toy Power Slap, or busy opening boxes of fucking cards on Instagram. What the fuck is that all about? Or maybe Khabib and Conor leaving just done him. But to be honest, I don't even know if the problem is Dana. Maybe it's the larger company that's the problem. Either way, they don't seem to be trying very hard anymore. It's a shame though, because it's just all still there to play for. So I'm going to do everyone a favour and completely sort all this shit out. I'm going to fix the UFC with these 5 changes. And the best part is, all of these changes are relatively cheap and easy. But I do think that if they were all implemented, it wouldn't be long until every MMA fan, far and wide, was absolutely buzzing their tits off. Let's not fuck around and crack on. Easy fix number 1. Start having regular one-on-one, face-to-face interviews in the lead up to the fights. Let's go crazy, maybe even the week before the fight. The UFC doesn't regularly do these types of interviews with upcoming fighters the way that boxing does. They got shows like Face Off and The Gloves Are Off. In boxing, they seem to put a lot more emphasis on the pre-fight sit-down to build drama, especially for the big fights. And it's effective. In fairness, the UFC have dabbled in this, and BT Sport back in the day did a few of them. You've got Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal, but it's been years since we've seen anything like that. Now, the UFC don't like to focus on fighters or matchups on a card until the week of the fight. And then they go through this minimal and procedural feeling program of build-up and promotion. It all makes the whole thing feel really like a conveyor belt. I think they've got to try a bit harder building up some storylines and drama. How hard would it be to have the top 2 or 3 matchups on a card just have a little face-to-face interview? Can you imagine Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silver sitting down to talk things out? Bryce would be over here trying to explain how lemonade isn't real, and Silver would just be sitting over there crying for some reason. It'd be gold. Or even better, imagine Ilia Topuria sitting opposite Islam Makhachev, both staring at each other, and you tell me that that doesn't rank your crank. Those interviews alone would be more compelling to the fans than everything that they currently do, and it would cost almost nothing. Much like subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. On to the next fix. Now this one might seem obvious at first, but they need to start stacking the numbered cards more, and at the expense of fight nights. The big numbered cards are getting watered down massively. Because there's so many cards now of all these fight nights, obviously it's great to have so many events, but because they've got all of these spaces to fill and they're trying to spread out top fighters here and there, it's taken away from the big cards, and we're getting overexposed with just averageness. It is imperative that the numbered cards feel special. Every single fight on the main card of a numbered event should have at least one top 5 fighter in it. That should just be a rule. There's easily enough fighters to achieve this. Fuck the fight nights. They can have what's left. There'll still be some known fighters and bangers on them, but we need to feel that feeling that we had at UFC 300 or even 298 or 299. We're going to watch the fight nights anyway. Let us regularly have a reason to get ridiculously excited, like Pat Barry when the school bell rings. Right, next up we got the press conferences. Once a highlight of fight week, and now just a formality. Sometimes it feels like they're actually trying to make them more shit with each one, just going through the motions like a reluctant hand job. There are just a few little tweaks that would make a really big difference. First of all, let's bring back the fan questions. Give the fans a mic, let's have a crack. Some iconic moments have been created by that. I'm sure the shift happened to maintain more control over narratives and avoid unpredictability and off-topic questions. With the UFC only allowing media-driven press conferences, and the media being so scared of losing their access and privileges, have left the press conferences feeling sterile and underwhelming, like my pickup game. And another little tweak to the press conferences would be to allow some alternative MMA media maybe. Maybe get some MMA YouTubers in there. People that are much more in touch with the fan base and what they actually are interested in knowing about. And while we're at it, press conferences could be a little bit longer. And also, this might be a bit ignorant or something, maybe focus on the English speaking ones a bit more. Or even better, use some AI to do a much better job of making the translation more seamless. Again, all those changes cost basically nothing. Next up is bringing back the thrill and the agony. I don't know if you remember it, but it had like behind the scene moments of the guys that won and the guys that lost, really enhancing the emotional highs and lows of the event. And the UFC released a sneak peek of it on YouTube, which was enough. And then I think the full version was on Fight Pass. But the last time we saw one of these was Adesanya versus Pereira over 2 years ago. And since then, nothing. This one isn't quite as cheap as the other ones because obviously you've got that to allow the resources to make them, but they've already got those resources just sitting around. It wouldn't take much. But as a fan, it really added to the connection of the fighters as people and deepened our connection with them. Personally, I think it's a shame to have lost that. And finally, a change that I think is much needed. They need a new and refreshed, clearer scoring. It's crazy that in this day and age, we can have a fight where there's a clear winner, and if it goes to the scorecards, nobody's confident that the right guy's going to win it. And often, they don't. I know we've all heard Rogan go on about how they just nick the scoring from boxing, but the judging is a big problem in the UFC. But the scoring is so open to interpretation that the crooked judges can just use it as a scapegoat. The scoring needs to be built from scratch, considering all the elements of an MMA fight, so that the fans, the judges and the fighters can all be on the same page when it comes out to win a fucking fight. Whilst that last one doesn't cost the earth, I admit it might take a little bit more work. But the only reason I can see not to fix the scoring and judging would be to continue to be able to have decisions that are favourable to the UFC. Now, there's more things that could be done, obviously, to improve the UFC for fans. Let me know some if you've got some ideas. But I think if those expertly crafted changes were put into action, I think within a handful of months, we'd find ourselves welcoming a new golden age of the UFC. Anyway, if you like this video, give us a sub, check out this playlist of recent bangers. See you next time.